Moore Law is underwritten in the public interest by the Moore Law Firm, a legal professional association. This is Moore Law on Fox 19.
Welcome to Moore Law, where we answer your legal questions live on the air. Today we're talking about healthcare negligence. We trust healthcare professionals to take care of us when we are sick or injured, but sometimes things do go wrong. If you have a question about medical malpractice, give us a call right now at 513-421-4691. Of course, as always, we'll take your questions live. But first, let's take a look at what we have on the upcoming dockets the next few weeks. On July 2nd, we'll be talking all about injuries. July 9th, you can ask our attorneys anything. And July 16th, what to do if you've been hurt on the job. Please join me in welcoming, as always on Monday mornings, Don Moore. How are you?
I'm doing great, Deb. I understand you had a good vacation.
I did. Was down in Sarasota, so I got out of there just in time. But you know, there are a lot of people from Cincinnati who go down there. I'm stunned. Every year I run into somebody from here.
I think I-75 is busy with a lot of Ohio and Detroit to Florida.
I think that
commuting.
is. And you had a busy weekend.
Yeah, I did. We went to, my wife and I went to Homerama yesterday out in Loveland. And really cool houses. I mean, it was just neat. The ceilings, the bathrooms, all that stuff was just neat stuff.
Did you put your wish list together?
I'm afraid she may have put her wish list. Yeah, we may suffer because of that. And I do have one thing that I really need to take care of. We've got a special day today. This is my granddaughter, Savannah Moore's 3rd birthday.
Happy birthday,
We're going to say
Savannah.
happy birthday to Savannah, that's right.
I'm glad you got that out of the way because you would be in big trouble as a grandfather.
I would be in so much trouble if I forgot that. You know, today we're going to have a lot of fun. I have a longtime familial connection with Jen and her family. Jennifer Lawrence, welcome.
Why, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit about your background, Jennifer?
Sure. I have been a lawyer for about 16 years, and I'm licensed in Ohio and Kentucky, and work with a great group of people that also includes some family members. Like Don, I work with my father and my husband and my sister, and like I said, a great group of a couple of other attorneys as well who we've worked together so long we call ourselves all family.
That's great.
It really is like that. And when her dad was in college, he worked for my dad in his law firm. When I was in law school, I worked for her dad in his law firm. And then later, when my son was in law school, he also worked for her dad. So it's like it just goes on and on.
I feel like a stranger in the group. But Jen, tell me a little bit about what makes your phone ring when people call you. What are the first things that you need to talk to them about regarding medical malpractice?
Well, the first thing is we talk about what happened, and a lot of times people, when they call, they want to know why something happened. There's usually someone who's been injured or who has died as a result of medical malpractice, and so we'll talk to them factually what happened. And we talk about, from a medical perspective, who all was involved in the care. So those are some of the first things initially we talk about. Okay.
And Don, you mentioned that you've had a lot of cases that unfortunately deal with exactly this.
Yeah, that's true. Well, when I was actually when I was a claims adjuster, I worked for and handled investigative medical claims for several hospitals locally. And then when I started practicing law, then I started representing clients privately, just as Jen's family does. And I've done that for over 32 years.
Okay. And Jen, also you mentioned there were some interesting, I thought the interesting statistics that you brought up just before the show, things that I have never heard.
Well, it's been my experience throughout the years that medical malpractice a lot of times will occur on a holiday or on a weekend or late at night, and a lot of errors occur in July because that is when the new residents start their residency and they're still in the learning phase. And so those are things that a lot of people may not know, but it's been my experience that that's when the errors tend to happen.
Right. And what should, does that mean I should avoid certain things, or do you think, you mentioned that there are, there's a small amount of people have, actually I believe we have a couple calls coming in, and I think the first one is Scott in Cincinnati. Scott, go ahead.
To a family member that had a procedure done, a colostomy bag was to be put in, and apparently the stoma had issues and basically had died off. And the doctors chose to send her home anyway, even though the nurses had documented it very well that the stoma was not reacting the way it was supposed to, and it was dying off, that, you know, it was documented, but they chose to send her home. Within 24 hours, she had to be rushed back to the hospital where she ensued infection, and basically overall spent 9 months in the hospital because of the whole procedure, the way it started off. Now, she's contacted attorneys, and they said, basically, because you've lived, you don't have a case. And that makes no sense to me.
Jen, what would you suggest?
Well, there's things that unfortunately have happened within the law that affect individuals' rights to bring a lawsuit. One of the things that has happened is that we've had some tort reform measures where there's limitations on damages. And so at the onset, there's a limitation of the money you can recover. And the insurance companies and Medicaid and Medicare also require subrogation or payback of medical expenses. And so when you take those two things into account, it becomes very difficult to undertake cases such as what's happened to your family member.
You know, how often do people, I think a lot of people, your instinct is to just, it's just terrible that something happened, but you don't step out of your comfort zone and go and ask for help and ask what some other, you know, avenues might be. So people, you know, they need to know that there's help out there.
It's really important, Deb, that you have an advocate. And when if you're in a hospital and you're seriously ill, you need someone there to keep an eye on your care and your treatment. Best to have a family member there the whole time. In this case, they talked about infection. I didn't hear all of the elements of what the caller talked about, but I heard infection. Infection is a risk of almost all procedures. It's very difficult to show that infection was necessarily caused by negligent conduct. So usually what you get into in a medical malpractice case with respect to infection is whether the follow-up was reasonable under the circumstances or whether it was substandard. And substandard is basically, are they doing it at a lesser standard than is expected of medical professionals under those circumstances? They're complicated and they're tricky.
Sounds like it. We'll go to another caller now, Cynthia in Cincinnati. Go ahead, Cynthia.
Yes, the question I have is that I had a neck fusion done and it's not moving, and the doctor wants to go back in because something occurred, but I feel like a CAT scan is $1 million picture and it tells everything. So I think that it might have been there when he done the surgery, but he didn't get it all out. So now I'm having problems getting up, moving around, and I was kind of wanting to know, how do I go about this?
Is there anything you might suggest for her, Jen?
Well, getting a second medical opinion, sometimes there's other doctors within the individual practice group, or if it's a hospital setting, there's house physicians available, for example, with whom you might get a second opinion. So medically, it's always important to take care of yourself first.
Okay, great. Thank you. We'll take a break now. Of course, we continue to take your calls live here on More Law, 421-4691. Give us a call. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to More Law on Fox 19, your legal questions live, with local broadcaster and award-winning reporter Deb Haas and Cincinnati personal injury attorney Don Moore, recognized by Ohio super lawyers. More answers, more help, more law on Fox 19.
Welcome back to More Law. Don Moore joining me, of course. Jennifer Lawrence, thanks for being here.
Sure.
And I think we have another call we want to get to right now. Sean in Amelia. Sean, I understand you had some problems after a hernia surgery.
Yeah, Deb. I had a surgery, a ventral hernia surgery, back in 2008. Since then, I've had 5 other surgeries to take care of complications. Mm-hmm. I'm now on disability. Back in 2008, after the surgery, I had noticed a hole where whether he had maybe missed a staple. He said it was fine. Took the staples out, put steri strips on it, and 2 days later, the incision split open and left me with a big hole in my stomach. And I was just wondering, is there anything that can be done? Like I said, I've been put on disability now because of this, and I'm only 44.
Okay. Jen, what kind of information might you give him?
Well, typically with medical malpractice cases, you only have a year from the date that the negligence occurred to file a lawsuit, but you may have some other avenues available to you. There's been many cases involving staples and product liability litigation, so that may be an avenue you could explore. And if you have further complaints, you could also call and register a complaint with the Ohio State Medical Board.
Okay. And we have another caller now. Let's see, Kathy in Indiana. Kathy, I understand you're looking for the best way to approach a medical malpractice suit. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Can you give us go ahead.
I had jaw surgery at the end of last year, and as a result of the surgery was coded as failed by 3 other doctors, in addition to the surgeon that performed the original surgery. As such, I have to have the surgery repeated. I'm going to experience a lot of additional substantial out-of-pocket costs, as insurance is not going to cover this second surgery. The surgeon's out of network, and I'm going to experience a lot of costs. I want to try and recoup those costs. I don't know the best way to try to approach a medical malpractice suit.
Okay, well, let's try to help with that. Don, what would you suggest for her?
Well, Kathy presents a circumstance that comes up really fairly often. Kathy, what I would suggest you do is basically you're going to figure out what it is you think the person did wrong, and you're going to get that by other medical opinions. And the first thing I try and do is I suggest clients talk to their treating physicians and see if they specifically will say, yes, this was an error, or no, this was an error. That's the least expensive way to find out. And you really can't pursue a medical malpractice case without a medical opinion. Local doctors will not testify against local doctors. So that makes it tricky. Often the answer is no, they're just not going to give you the opinion. Your only next recourse is then to talk to a lawyer about perhaps having outside experts come in and take a look, and that gets very expensive. That gets to the next part of your question, and that is the financial feasibility. When you're talking about just getting reimbursement for a second surgery, ultimately, if you have a good result, even though it's prolonged or requires an extra surgery, an extra expense, that's probably not worth pursuing as a medical malpractice case. We figure it normally costs over $100,000 to pursue a medical malpractice case, which means small cases, if you're talking about an additional surgery that maybe costs $20,000, $30,000, you cannot pursue a $20,000 or $30,000 medical malpractice case economically. You just can't.
Okay. I think we can get one more call in before the break. Kenneth in Dayton, go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I just want to ask a question regarding forced medication. Can a county jail force you to take medication not by a doctor?
Anybody?
Well, I think there's different rules that, of course, apply to prisons, and typically there has to be some type of an order by a prison physician, if it's not your own physician, for the medication to be given.
Don?
You know, one of the things that this brings up, and what Kenneth referred to, this medication business, if you're given the wrong medication, oftentimes you can have an issue that comes up that's vicarious liability. Now, if it's in a prison system, that's different. But if it's privately, like if a pharmacist gives the wrong medication, then you potentially have a claim against the pharmacy because of vicarious liability. That is where the employer is responsible for what the employee does wrong. And basically it's got to be in the course and scope of their employment. Now, we don't just have that in the case of pharmacists. we see that a lot. I'm sure, Jennifer, you've experienced that a lot in your cases, haven't you?
We have. A lot of times nurses will be employees of hospitals, and physicians will either have their own private practice group, or now a lot of them are also becoming hospital employees. And so the hospitals would be responsible for the physician's conduct as well.
Okay, all right. We are going to take a break. Of course, we'll come back and take some more of your calls live on the air, 421-4691. We'll be right back.